Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It doesn't matter what time it is. Just know today is the day that the Lord has made, and I will be just to be glad in it. Why? God is good and He's good all the time. Nah. Okay. Bam. Y'all know what we about to do. We rolling it into chapter 9, man. Yes, 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 yes. Chapter 9. We condemn this conduct. Let's go. Let's get into it. Bird and Delia Oliver, two doors down from Ed Collins and his wife Julia, and not far from the cluster of houses where Rob Edwards, Oscar Daniel, and Ernest Knox had lived before the race troubles began. Having seen three of his neighbors arrested and one of them lynched on the Cumming Square, Oliver must have realized in October of 1912 that his days in Forsyth County were numbered. In the weeks after the trials, he watched the black community grow smaller and smaller as one family after another decided it was better to risk the uncertainties of the road than to take their chances with the armed and increasingly dangerous white people of the county. Forsyth's vigilantes eventually caught the attention of the national press, and papers as far away as New York told readers of a mass exodus in a black population in terror of night riders. So it was making its rounds around, the U.S. that black people were literally displaced from Forsyth County. So where niggas be trying to act like this is new information now or it's never happened. Nigga, this was pervasive information once upon a time. Y'all niggas is just not picking up books, you know what I'm saying? Reading. And the content that y'all engage in on social media and stuff ain't educational. Not like that. Where it's telling you about what's going on in the world, what happened in the world. Like the Bible says, ain't nothing new under the sun. Nothing. Anyways, in the weeks after the trials, he watched the black community grow smaller and smaller as one family after another decided it was better to risk the uncertainties of the road than to take their chances with armed and increasingly dangerous white people of the county. Forsyth's vigilantes eventually caught the attention of the national papers and press as far away as New York, which told readers of a mass exodus in a black population in terror of night riders. The anti-Negro movement began in Forsyth County. A correspondent wrote in the New York Times, unchecked by local law enforcement. We see that now. You got every motherfreaking, it seemed like local municipalities sitting there crying about increased crime. Yet every local municipality, especially these big major cities, are increasing funding for police. How y'all crime increasing when your police presence is increasing, police funding is increasing, police tactical policing equipment is increasing? How? How is crime still increasing? It's interesting because there was actually a research done in 1973. It's called the Kansas City Preventative Patrol Experiment, which literally looked at whether or not the increase of police presence had any effect, and if it did, what that effect was on not only crime itself, but the perception of crime, how people perceived crime to exist, right? And they found no matter in the beats where they increased police presence, in the beats where they lowered increased or police presence, or in the beats where it remained untouched, it was neutral, right? They found that crime did not change, neither did the perception. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We have more police, we have less. Doesn't matter. Because the perception of crime doesn't change. Niggas are still going to think there's a bunch of crime happening. Niggas are still going to think there's no crime happening. People still are going to believe whatever they believe. People are still going to participate in crime the way that they've been participating, regardless. Because the crazy part about it, In the beats where police presence was a little heavier, guess what crime ended up doing? Displacing itself, which basically it did just like the black people in Forsyth County. The black people left Forsyth County, went to a whole nother location. That's all the crime did. So police presence had no effect, baby. But this says, unchecked by local law enforcement, he said, the crusade against the Negroes is being conducted by hands of mounted men who ride through the county at night and leave notices at the homes of the Negroes, warning them to leave at once. But then you got white people sitting here talking about our ancestors didn't do nothing. All the people that participated in slavery are dead. 1912, slavery was not even in existence. That's post-slavery. So what are y'all excuses now? Some of these white people names I've listed, these are some of your ancestors. Y'all only maybe 2, 3 generations removed? Like, I am only 32 years old and I was alive and spent time with individuals who were literally 1 generation removed from slavery. Slavery ended, and here was this generation of people. Those are the generations of people I got to interact with growing up in my youth. So when people be trying to make it seem like, it was so long ago, slavery was so long ago. My daddy is still alive, who is 62 years old, and he was alive. And he was raised by and taken care of and interacted with individuals who were once upon a time enslaved. So we are not that far removed. My daddy's still alive, 62 years old. Anyways. The anti-Negro movement began in Forsyth County, a correspondent wrote in New York Times, unchecked by local law enforcement, he said. The crusade against the Negroes is being conducted by hands of mounted men who ride through the county at night and leave notices at the homes of the Negroes, warning them to leave at once. In many instances, respectable, hardworking Negroes have been frightened into sacrificing their property and fled. So a lot of the time when people talk about reparations and they talk about how slavery this, and people be like, well, slavery ended so long ago. Ain't nobody affected by slavery that's still alive. Bullshit. In addition to the fact you have people who literally paid for property, land, housing, homes, right? In Forsyth County, who straight up just up and left because you got some psycho white people, racist white people chasing them out over a crime that some black people didn't even commit. It was their own people committing it. But they want to chase out the Negroes over something that they white skin folk did. Right. And now you have these next generations that's like, yo, my family paid for this. We have deeds. We had land and we lost it because we had to evade the scene to ensure our survival. Let's continue. As a renter in the overwhelmingly white community of Oscarville, Bird Oliver was just a respectable, hardworking Negro when he, his wife Delia, and their 7 children, ages 3 to 14, set out on foot, heading east toward the Chattahoochee River. They were bound, like so many of their fellow refugees, for the railroad town of Gainesville in Hall County. The Oliver family's flight from Forsyth was similar to what hundreds of their neighbors endured. But unlike those who left no trace of the journey, Bird Oliver used to tell his daughter Dorothy all about it. Every so often, he would sit on the doorstep and talk. He could talk about it 15 to 20 years later. He said he would always sit with his chin in the palm of his hand, and the tears would run down his sleeve. He has cried about it many a day. When Forsyth once again made national headlines in 1987, just 5 years before I was born. 77-year-old Dorothy Rucker Oliver recounted her father's memories from Gainesville's time. Now, just in case y'all want to see who Bird Oliver is, this fine gentleman right here. This is the gentleman who told his daughter repeatedly of the experiences that he endured with the displacement of him as well as several other black residents in Forsyth County. She said, "My dad saw everything in 1912, referring to the arrests of Knox, Daniel, and Collins, the burning of black homes and churches, and the ultimatums delivered in the night. They knew everything that was going to happen. It doesn't take bad news long to spread." Bert Oliver told his daughter that many black families were forced to leave behind drums of syrup, canned goods, family keepsakes, and most important, farmland. And when, as a child, Dorothy asked her father if he had really grown up in an all-white Forsyth, Oliver told how his family banded together with other groups of refugees for safety, then set out across a landscape teeming with white mobs. See, for them, it was mind-blowing. Like, what? You really lived in Forsyth County? It's all white. But around the time that this gentleman lived in Forsyth County, it wasn't all white. It was heavily populated by working class black folk. Says he traveled with a group of about 75 people. They would walk so far and then count everyone in the group. Just before they got to the river, 3 of his relatives were missing, but you couldn't turn back to look for them. According to family lore, Bird and his wife Delia got separated somewhere along the road, with the 3 oldest daughters following their mother and the 4 youngest making the 11-mile journey to Gainesville with their father. Bird and these 4 children reappeared in the census of 1920, living with Oliver's second wife, Beulah Rucker, who he met once they had resettled in Hall County. So him and his first wife got split, and his 3 children, his 3 eldest children. And then he ends up remarrying, where he pops up on the census in 1920. And I was just looking at a census of my great grandparents in 1920, but it was in Carolina, South Carolina. It's not clear whether Bird and Delia chose to part ways when they fled Forsyth, or she and the older children never made it to a planned reunion, or they suffered some violent attack along the road. But the records confirm Bird Oliver's story of losing half of his family on the journey out of Forsyth, never to be seen again. And this is a common recurrence of black families. Every time they're exposed out of these communities, this is what happens. While he and his second wife, Beulah, would go on to become leaders in the black community of Gainesville and founders of one of the most successful African-American schools in the state, according to Dorothy, her father never forgot about all he left behind in Forsyth. And like so many others, his life was divided between what happened before and what came after the fall of 1912. It's like you had to pick up and start a whole new life abruptly. It's asinine. As more and more hardworking, law-abiding people like Bird and Delia Oliver abandoned their homes, the county's white landowners began to feel deeply concerned about the future. A report in the New York Times made it clear that as the violence spread, the night riders began threatening not just black residents, but many of their white employers. Recently, warnings have been sent to white planters who employ many Negroes and who have announced that they intend to protect their employees. To these planters, the night riders have sent notices stating that unless they cease to protect the Negroes, their barns and homes will be burned. So now you got these psychos terrorizing white people, the employers of, these white employers, and they're like, get rid of these black folks or we tearing up your stuff, which ensures that there's no one to protect you. And this is why here in 2025, it's not uncommon to come across instances where people are in need of help and people will see people in need of help and won't do jack squat for them. It's I'm a mind my own business type of ordeal. We've literally been programmed through the unfair treatment of the government And even the domestic violence that takes place, within the U.S., the domestic terrorism, right? And you're forced to believe like, I'm better off if I just mind my business. I don't defend myself and I don't defend anyone else. Everyone knew that arson was no idle threat among the white people of North Georgia. And as the terror escalated, Cherokee County, which borders Forsyth to the west, saw a sudden influx of refugees. Now, this is when you start to get the mixing of black and Native American Cherokee Indians, right? Which this ain't when you start, but this is when it starts to really, pick up, right? 3 wagon loads stopped here last week, a witness said, and we are informed that several more are in. Now, these people, I got to go back. It said, everyone knew that arson was no idle threat amongst the white people of North Georgia, and as the terror escalated, Cherokee County, which borders Forsyth to the west, saw a sudden influx of refugees. These are residents in Georgia. So technically, these are American residents fleeing to a whole nother location in the United States, seeking refuge. You know what these would be considered here right now in 2025? That people ignorantly, interchangeably use as with immigrants? It's migrants. These are what you consider migrants. They're going from one domestic locale to another in search of a better opportunity, better home, in search of refuge. So when people sit here and talk about, we got all these migrants coming here, we got all these migrants, y'all speak ignorantly as if they're synonymous with immigrants. They're not. Migrants are domestic people voyaging around looking for work, a better life, safety. You see what I'm saying? Like these people. They lived in Forsyth County, Georgia. They were residents of Forsyth County, Georgia. A white girl was brutally murdered 9 times out of 10 by a white dude because according to data, crime data, you are more likely to be harmed, assaulted, killed, all that junk, raped by someone you know over a stranger. Over 90% of assaults, homicides, murders, rapes, etc. occurs between parties who know each other. It's really, I'm being generous here, it's less than 10%, but it's really less than 5% where these instances occur between strangers. So it's very, very likely that May Crow was raped and brutally murdered by a white man whom she knew. Or maybe a woman. But let's continue. Everyone knew that arson was no idle threat among the white people of North Georgia, and as the terror escalated, Cherokee County, which bordered Forsyth west, saw a sudden influx of refugees. 3 wagon loads stopped here last week, a witness said, and we are informed that several more are in and around Canton. Residents of Hall County saw long lines of displaced families walking along the roads leading out of Forsyth, and the Savannah Tribune ran an article with the headline, Gainesville Invaded, describing the arrival of hordes of Negroes from Forsyth and neighboring counties who have been driven from their homes by indignant whites. The story went on to tell how anonymous letters have been sent to almost every planter in the Hill County. These missives threaten arson and dynamiting of the houses in which the Negroes live as penalty for disobedience. In many instances, mobs of whites appeared at the Negro homes on farms and openly demanded evacuation. A.J. Julian, a longtime resident of Forsyth, was an old friend of Joseph Mackey Brown's, and after hearing reports of such lawlessness, he wrote directly to the governor to make sure Brown understood that the convictions of Knox and Daniel had not brought an end to mob violence, and that the situation was growing worse by the day. So where they rushed it, talk about, we just need to get a guilty verdict because this will quiet everything down, everything will get back to normal. We can go back to business as usual, go back to making money, profiting. Let's hurry up. They hurried up, and none of what they was expecting is actually happening. I love it. I love it. A very important matter I desire to call to your attention to is the protection of the citizens of Georgia, and especially of Forsyth. There is a gang of night marauders that have run about all of the Negroes, and they are bold in their operations. It seems that the sheriffs are cowards and fearful. Reminds you of January 6th, right? When the cops evaded those white people with guns, all them white people. And that was what, 3-4 years ago? Come on now. Come on now. Ain't nothing new under the sun. That's what the Bible says. Cops are scary. And we see it all the time. White people be bucking up at the cops. They don't do none of that. These people be practically beating the cops, abusing them. Nothing. You look at the motherfucking cops wrong as a black person, they already done pulled the gun out and shot you. It's crazy. Julian told of one raid on a group of young black women and their infant children who were visited by night riders only after whites made sure that all the adult men were away and the women unarmed. Last Sunday, 5 men went to a Negro house. They sent a young man up to see if the Negro men were gone and asked the women if they had any guns. When they found the men gone and no pistols, they went up and ordered the women to leave. One with right, I feel like they got some typos here or something, some grammatical errors, but one with right young baby, I'm going to just say one with a young baby, and it was pouring rain. After they left, they shot the dogs, taken all their furniture, clothes, and bedding, piled it out in the yard, then set it afire and burned it, dogs and all. White people are motherfucking psychos. And this starts to make me wonder about my motherfucking neighbors, because I got some neighbors that's a little psycho about my dog. And I think it's because they think she's supposed to be community dog. I don't know what it is with some of these psycho white people that be acting like I'm supposed to have a community dog, right? And, oh, I want to pet up all of your dog. Now they done try to walk up on my dog and pet her. She done nipped at him like, back the freak up, nigga, because you don't know me. You coming over here to touch me. Now all of a sudden, every little instance they want to call the animal control. They gave me permission to even have my dog on their property. Although she wasn't even on their property. She don't like them. I don't like them. Me and my dog connected. She don't like whom I like. You know, whom I don't like. And both my neighbors on both sides, we can't stand them people. And she can't stand them. And these people, they play the games. They call the cops. They call animal control. I mean, one time they called the cops on me talking about some noise disturbance. Mind you, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning. It was a motherfucking summer, beautiful day. And the cops come to my house talking about how my music was so loud. I'm like, dude, this ain't quiet hours. He talking about, yeah, but the municipal laws states that your music should not be heard 25 feet from the residence or some trash. Nigga, what? So now you measuring the distance that the sound travels? Like, do y'all say this when people be out here honking? Dogs be barking? Children's loud as heck? Yelling? Get the freak out of here. Kill their dogs and all. This is, I know white people with psychosis. I got 2 neighbors side by side. I am literally sandwiched between 2 psychosis having neighbors. And then they give creeper vibes, especially that nigga on the left of me. His name Mark. He don't even live there. That ain't even his house. His girlfriend Linda owned that joint. But this nigga be on some creepy junk, damn near standing by my house trying to look up in my windows. The nigga gives me rapist vibes, honestly. But no weapon formed against these shall prosper. Mess around and get knocked upside the head by Gabriel, the mother freaking angel. Don't play with me. Anyways, I know about white people and their psychosis. Burn the dogs and all. He also knew Brown would be troubled by news that rich farmland lay abandoned and unplanted due to the violence. Hundreds of acres of land will not be cultivated this year, which will be a loss in taxes to both state and counties. Now, they don't give a damn about the people. It's just, damn, we losing out on money. Labor now cannot be found to hire or rent. Is this state of affairs to go on? It will end in race war if some check is not put on these outrages. 1912, they talking about race wars. Here in 2024, these crazy white people still calling for race wars. Us black people aren't concerned with y'all. The only people minding other people's businesses are y'all. Niggas don't give a damn about y'all. Honestly. When I travel, I intentionally look for places where I be like, where the niggas at. I don't want to be nowhere where there ain't no black folks, especially if it's too white. Ugh. What is it? The winter? It is now, but come on. The check, Julian proposed, was simple. Pursue and arrest the offenders and prosecute them vigorously in the courts. Yeah, okay. Y'all not doing that to these white people. Do you know how much money it'll cost you? Especially criminally? The government funds that. Y'all ain't doing that. Y'all already crying and complaining about the people that y'all failed to protect that was chased out because y'all ain't got no taxes coming on that property and stuff. When Brown wrote back, he offered a $50 reward to anyone who could identify the perpetrators of violence against black citizens, and said he too deplored the action on the part of the lawless element who are committing so many outrageous crimes on the people of that section. Ain't nobody gonna come forward. I mean, even Sheriff Reed himself was a motherfreaking cone head wearing, bed sheet wearing, KKK member. Right along with several of these others. You expect them to snitch on themselves? No. Come on. We see with the police, the biggest police force, like the KKK, is, you know what I'm saying? The biggest gang in the world, or in the United States, like the KKK, is the police. They call it blue code? They don't snitch on each other. All them niggas raggedy. Let's continue. But while Brown shared Julian's anxiety about the financial consequences, I'm telling you, it's financial consequences, because how you going to come for the, you know what I'm saying? You losing money, and then you're going to arrest these people, y'all? This costs the money. Anyways, when Brown wrote back, he offered a $50 reward, $50, to anyone who could identify the perpetrators of violence against black citizens. And he said to deplore the action on the part of the lawless element who are committing so many outrageous crimes on the people of that section. But while Brown shared Julian's anxiety about the financial consequences, he was steadfast in his view that this was a problem to be solved by local people themselves whenever possible, not state or federal authorities. That bailout is why havoc be wreaked, okay? The law-abiding element. Brown replies, what law-abiding element? Y'all still trying to find the perpetrators and nobody's come forward. So what law-abiding element? Oh, my goodness. Brown replied to Julian and concluded, we'll have to, by concerted efforts, run down these people and bring them to justice. Baby, shut up. What, you want black people to do it? Y'all can't even get control of them. The freak you think we gonna do? Mind our business? In mid-October, a group of Forsyth whites tried to do just that when they announced that a mass meeting would be held at the Cumming courthouse to address the lawlessness that was driving black residents out of the county. The problem was clearly not going away on its own. And on the evening of Wednesday, October 16th, a little more than 3 weeks after all hell broke loose, on the night of May Crow's funeral, concerned citizens gathered to discuss actions the law-abiding element might take to stop and hopefully reverse the exodus. He ain't reversing nothing. Them black folks is gone. Peace. Many surely, they put up that one finger and dip. Many surely felt a moral Christian duty. Shut up. If you felt a moral Christian duty, you would have asked God for some wisdom to decipher what really happened. And you would not try to hold two people accountable, or three plus, that ain't have jack squat to do with it. And then you would have made better efforts to protect those people. But no, nigga. No. Many surely felt a moral Christian duty to speak out against the violence and in defense of the black families who have lived in their homes, cooked their meals, and nursed their children. Yeah, niggas be saying this all the time. We motherfuckers stuck our teeth. Black women stuck our teeth into your white babies' mouths. And look how the freak you treat us. Fed you. You niggas don't know how to cook and clean after yourself. Filthy. Filthy. For generations, too. In some cases, going all the way back to the days of slavery. And was still doing it post. As one local man put it, they drove out a cook who raised 17 children out of my kitchen. Present at the mass meeting were planters, mill operators, mine owners, blue-collared workers, hard-working class whites, poor. Jesus. Present at the mass meeting were planters, mill operators, and mine owners, as well as members of rich white families who could hardly imagine life without their black help. All these people had in common an urgent goal to keep that money going. And that was to stop the intimidation as soon as possible, lest they wait to find that every black field hand, overseer, driver, cook, and washerwoman in the county had vanished into the night. Oh, for God, help us, please, Lord. We can't lose the help. Coming mayor Charlie Harris presided over the gathering, and its secretary was John F. Eccles, a 24-year-old who had grown up in Cumming, gone to school in Atlanta, and recently returned to serve as a clerk in Harris's law office. The official resolution that Eccles recorded in his stenography pad shows that many whites in Cumming were deeply troubled by what was happening after dark. Then why y'all ain't bring y'all tails out after dark? Their resolution informed the governor that the violence was not a series of unrelated attacks, but part of a coordinated effort on the part of some unknown persons to drive the colored people from the county, which is evidenced by letters written and dropped off at the doors of this class of our people and in their mailboxes notifying them that they must leave and containing threats against them, as well as letters to some of the white people, all of which is unlawful and detrimental to the interests of the common people. In a cover letter to the governor, Harris added that quite a number of black churches had been burned and inhabited houses shot into. Inhabited houses, so that means people were in there. Shot into by persons unknown, and letters of intimidation sent through the mails, contrary, we believe, to the laws. This last detail about threats being delivered through the U.S. Postal Service, was no small matter, for it meant that these persons unknown were violating not just county and state criminal codes, but federal laws. The implicit argument was that this was no longer a problem for a part-time mayor and a small county police force, but a matter worthy of the attention of the governor and the federal judiciary. As part of their appeal for help, those present affirmed their commitment to peace and order. We condemn this conduct, they said, and pledge ourselves to give to the innocent and law-abiding colored people in the county the reasonable and lawful protection in our power and our aid in ferreting out the real perpetrators and bringing them to justice. The resolution called on Judge William T. Newman of Georgia's Northern District Federal Court to open an investigation and reminded state officials that Knox and Daniel were soon to be brought back and hung near the Cumming Square. Citizens of Forsyth asked the governor to send the Georgia National Guard to help in maintaining order and preserving the peace, as well as suppressing evils already existing. Finally, the resolution called for immediate action from Governor Brown and Judge Newman, them raggedy niggas, and stressed the key role Bill Reed would have to play in stopping the violence. That raggedy nigga too. We pledge ourselves to stand by Sheriff Reed, the document concluded, and give him our support in protecting the innocent cities or citizens of our county. You expect the KKK member that was right along with the people that hid at his house and allowed them people to run up in the jail to get them people, where his deputy Hummus was forced to deal with that lynch mob by himself? That same sheriff, you expect him to help the people? And you've got to be out your mind. Given Reed's complicity with the mob that he had already killed Rob Edwards. We'll run that back because I butchered that sentence. Given Reed's complicity with the mob that had already killed Rob Edwards, which is Jane's husband, this now sounds like a case of tragically wishful thinking. The proclamation of the October mass meeting was a clear and unequivocal call to an end of the violence. And it provides evidence that only 3 weeks into the explosions, many white residents understood what was happening around them and tried to stop it. Rather than sitting idly by, they called upon those with state and federal power to investigate these depredations and bring the guilty parties to justice. The answer Governor Brown sent back to Cumming 5 days later was just as clear and unequivocal as Mayor Harris had been in his plea for help. I am in receipt of your letter asking my aid in restoring peace and order in your county, the governor wrote. In reply, I will state that this is a matter for the judge, sheriff, and other local authorities to handle. The governor has no authority to take any steps to give protection until the local authorities advise that they are unable to enforce the laws and properly protect life and property. I sincerely hope that the good people of Forsyth County will cooperate in giving protection to all who peaceably pursue their avocations and obey all the laws. Judge Newman also failed to act, even though the Cumming resolution implored him to launch a federal investigation and to use his office to arrest those making terrorist threats. Instead, Newman was busy playing his part in America's original war on drugs, prosecuting thousands of poor, small-time moonshiners. War on drugs. That's interesting. Prosecuting thousands of poor, small-time moonshiners who were arrested in large numbers after Georgia passed one of the earliest prohibition laws in the nation. Now, that's interesting that they use war on drugs in regards to moonshine. I know this is during the exhibition era when it came, or prohibition era when it came to alcohol, but I did not know that war on drugs, at least that title, was associated with the prohibition era. And then it circled back around with, what's that dude named? Ronald Reagan? Between Ronald Reagan and Nixon. I can't think of the dude's first name right now, but them turds back to back. Nixon conjured up the idea and Ronald Reagan brought it to fruition. Ain't nothing new under the sun. With corn prices depressed for much of the first decade of the century, and with much of North Georgia unserved by railroad lines, thousands of upland farmers had realized that it was far easier to transport a wooden crate of mason jars than it was to move heaping bushels of corn around the rocky roads out of the hills. Once those jars of white lightning reached places like Gainesville and Atlanta, they fetched far more on the black market than any wagon load of produce ever could. Pound for pound, ears of corn were no match for white corn liquor, no matter the risk of arrest by federal revenuers. The massive leather minute book of Judge Newman's Northern District Court is filled with convictions of one poor white distiller after another in the fall of 1912, usually on charges of federal tax evasion. And that's the issue, because when poor people get hemmed up when it comes to their criminal activities, it's not because of the fact that you are participating in the crime itself, right? Like, yeah, they can pass these laws that prohibit the possession of, cannabis and blah, 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 blah. But if you think about it, is that if you look at these laws, it doesn't criminalize the use. So like when in New York, when marijuana was illegal, in our literal, the New York penal law, it would not state that it was illegal to smoke marijuana. It's not illegal to shoot up heroin. It's not illegal to snort, cocaine. When you see the penal law, no matter what the state is, the law usually criminalizes possession and intent to sell. Because at the end of the day, the government wants money. They want the money, right? So if you sell weed, alcohol, this is why distillation is illegal now when it comes to making alcohol. Moonshining isn't illegal. You can moonshine. But when you moonshine where you creating large quantities, now they're like, hold on, we about to hem you up with possession and intent to sell, because they assume you ain't got all of this for yourself. You got all of this with the intentions to sell, but because you're not legitimate, you didn't pay you didn't go through the feds to get your licensing and your accreditation to be able to sell, which is money for them. You did not pay to create a business that is taxable under that state and that nation. So we coming for you. On top of the fact that when it comes down to the fact is that you sold all that. We legally can confiscate it utilizing asset forfeiture. And we could take it all because what? You acquired all of this using illegal, illegitimate means, and you did not pay any of your taxes. Because if you think about it, when you see all these celebrities, they getting arrested and hemmed up for tax evasion, that's all it is. They don't care about the crime that you commit. I mean, a lot of people out here committing crime. But if you give the government a pinch of what you got, they good for it. That's why a lot of these major companies evade prison time, like Purdue, Big Pharma. You got companies like Kodak. You got companies that's like these lithium cycle joints, these motherfucking ports and stuff that is polluting the air and literally pushing out toxins into the air that people are breathing in, sticking to their insides, and it's tainting them, killing them. But nothing comes from it. Look at Big Pharma, the opioid pandemic. This thing been going on for at least 3 decades. Hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered, if not millions, over the years. Yet Big Pharma evades accountability, being held responsible because what? They go to court, they pay a hefty fine, and they evade court or they evade jail. Poor people go to jail because they ain't got no money to give. Because, I mean, how many criminals do you know? How many people participating in legitimate employment do you know who sell drugs, sell, whatever the freak they doing, guns illegally, whatever the freak they doing? How many of you do you know taking out 30 to 40 to 50%, setting it aside just in case they get hemmed up by the cops? Because all you got to do is literally have some money set aside. You will evade jail time. Everybody talks about it. The incarcerated, those that are charged, arrested, and convicted, this is a poor man's problem. The rich ain't in there. Same thing with the military. The rich don't employ it. The military is full of poor bodies. Same thing with jails and prison, but let's continue. The massive leather minute book of Judge Newman's Northern District Court is filled with convictions of one poor white distiller after another in the fall of 1912, usually on charges of federal tax evasion. Federal tax evasion. Usually on the charges of federal tax evasion. So you see, it said poor white distiller. War on drugs. These are small-time moonshiners. And it says that they usually fill up this judge's book on charges of federal tax evasion. That just means that we don't really look at what you're doing as illegal. What we view as illegal is the fact that you're not paying us. The fact that you gave us no money, that's why you're going to jail. What does it contain in a single case brought against the night riders who, during the same months, were using the U.S. mail to make terrorist threats against African Americans? It was a federal offense for a man to stand in some shady hollow of Forsyth and quietly fill a jar with liquor. And the government sent a virtual army of revenue agents into North Georgia to arrest moonshiners and break up their stills. Yep. Still doing it to this day. But when those same white men spent their nights shooting, bombing, and burning black residents out of their homes, the federal government, like Governor Joseph Mackey Brown, one of y'all kin folks, turned a blind eye and a deaf ear. Interesting. They always do that. The government will come for you for money, but not for the actual crime that you're committing. I'll be taking notes so I could come back later. Anyways, in the summer of 1915, W.E.B. Du Bois, editor of the NAACP's magazine, The Crisis, sent a journalist named Royal Freeman Nash to Cumming to investigate reports of a wholesale exodus of blacks from Forsyth County. I hate the fact that people refer to black people as black. And I think it's this guy, Patrick Phillips. He the writer. He white. Referring to black people as blacks is wild. The resulting article, which appeared in November of 1915, gives us one of the only written accounts of these events that comes from outside the Southern point of view. Nash was a social worker and secretary of the NAACP, but he worked for the NAACP. But as a white man, he could walk through places like Forsyth in relative anonymity, and years of investigating racial crimes had honed Nash's gift for getting people to talk. After interviewing whites all over Forsyth, as well as members of the black community who had fled to neighboring counties, Nash described how whites had exploited these desperate situations of their black neighbors in 1912 and had swooped in with offers to buy livestock and farm implements at a fraction of their real value, which is what we see currently now, what they call gentrification of more urban communities, right? They move out the poor black people. Then when I say move out, I'm not talking about like on some, like they just move somewhere else. Like, no, I'm talking about over policing, that mass incarceration. Yes, that took place between the late 1980s going into the early 2000s. Yes, that is what motherfreaking expose black people out of the community, because now you sending so many people to motherfucking jail, you breaking up families, people can't afford the rent because everything going up. And now you got people moving because their lives falling apart. You got people getting arrested. You got people dying from the stress, sicknesses because they can't afford to eat better, take care of themselves, go to the hospital. Healthcare is unaffordable. I mean, when you look at all the stuff that exists in people's life, it's like, damn. All of this stuff is exactly what it is. It's systemic. It's systematically set forth so someone else can profit off of it. And it's usually the same niggas that have been profiting off of stuff for several generations. That's why when niggas praise people like the Michael Jordans and the LeBron James, them niggas is new money. I don't care nothing about no Jay-Z. New money. He is beholden to the richer. Someone richer than him can make all of his stuff disappear. Why? Because they come from old money, generational wealth that's been around for a while. So that's why I say this has been happening. We see it now in these communities. New York City, Detroit, Michigan, motherfreaking parts of Chicago, Illinois. You got parts of motherfreaking Dayton, Ohio. You got parts of St. Louis that literally is being over policed, right? You got social workers coming in there, motherfucking CPS tearing up, wreaking havoc on households to the point where people ain't got nothing else left to do but go somewhere else. On top of the fact that they end up with so many convictions and the offenses that they were convicted over are stuff that could get them eliminated for even getting access to housing as a renter. Then you take into consideration that 9 times out of 10, you ain't got no good credit. You ain't got no money saved up, so you can't buy to own. So they just displacing you. They making you homeless. They putting you in prisons. They killing you, putting you in the motherfucking morgues if you can afford it. Maybe cremated. Maybe your body gets sold on the black market. Your organs and stuff. It's a hot mess out here. And then you got white people moving into these communities that just have so much culture. Oh my goodness, there's so much culture here. Yes. Because they were kicked out for your raggedy tail to move in. Just so you could sit here and do that dumb stuff and say that weird comment. Let's continue. We're going to run that back. After interviewing whites all over Forsyth, as well as members of the black community who had fled to neighboring counties, Nash described how whites had exploited the desperate situation of their black neighbors in 1912 and had swooped in with offers to buy livestock and farm implements at a fraction of their real value. A Negro would receive an anonymous letter giving him 24 to 36 hours, occasionally 10 days, to quit the county, Nash wrote. And that meant precipitate flight and abandonment of everything owned in the world. In other cases, it meant a sale at a few days' notice, during which a cow worth $25 would bring $8 to $9, and hogs worth $15 to $20 sold for $4 to $6. House and land brought nothing. If the Negro owned a mule, he moved out his furniture. Otherwise, it burned after his departure, because mules can actually carry up to about 160 pounds in addition to their own weight. Then it says failure to evacuate on the date set meant a stealthy visit in the night and either dynamite or the torch. The result was a state of terror which caused one Negro family to accept a 24-hour notice delivered by 2 children, aged 5 and 6, respectively, who had learned the game from their elders. A 5 and a 6-year-old came to these people's houses and left them a notice saying, "Get the freak up out of here, or we coming to blow you up with dynamite." These are the same 5 to 6-year-old who grew up in the 1960s, the 1970s, and these niggas is adults wreaking havoc on people's lives while they're trying to fight for civil rights. These are the same adults that created a whole new generation in the 80s and the 90s and in the early 2000s, and this stuff has continued. But you got these same psychosis having white folks sitting out here talking about ain't nobody motherfucking dealing with the effects of slavery. Child, that's where your understanding come to, baby. You just might need to pick up a book and ask God to increase your motherfucking learning abilities, your retention, because your comprehension. Ask the good Lord for some wisdom, some understanding, because you're lacking. As Forsyth's white children learned the game of terrorizing black neighbors and driving them from their homes, a small group of African Americans tried to continue living peacefully in town, hoping they might be protected by their close connections to rich whites. Nash spoke with one black employee at Cumming boarding house and told how even after repeated notices, the owner kept her on until January, but let her go then for fear he could no longer protect the servant's life. Nash heard similar stories about longtime employees on the farms of the county whose white bosses only dismissed them, often with regret and apologies after repeated threats from the mobs. Nigga, don't nobody want your apologies and your regrets. You done fired them and kicked them out. Like, it is what it is. Asked if he knew of any cases where blacks were defended by whites, a Forsyth farmer told Nash that old man Roper yonder had a nigger he well nigh couldn't live without. Knew every stone and stump on the farm. The boys warned him time and again to get out of him, to get shed of him, but Roper would keep him on. So one night they just had to pick a stick of dynamite under the nigger's house. No, it didn't kill him, but it started him for Hall County right smart. I reckon they won't be back. You see, The young fellers are growing up sort of with the idea that this is a white man's county. So they're saying that the young people grew up with the idea that this is white man's county. And here we are in 2025, niggas still look at Forsyth County as white people's county. Even though they literally displaced black people, kicked them out violently. Farm by farm, cabin by cabin. The last black residents who dared to remain in Forsyth after the death of May Crow were rooted out, and those who defended them were taught with dynamite and torches the cost of resisting the new whites only rule. Whatever Sheriff Reed knew about the men behind such terrorism, and whatever role he played in the violent performances that took place after dark, there is no record of a single warrant or arrest for any of the crimes committed against the property and people of black Forsyth in 1912. Makes sense. That's exactly what the police do now. Jack squat, because they are a part of the very groups of people that don't want us here anyways. By mid-October, the editor of the Dahlonega Nugget could claim that a gentleman of Forsyth County who was here last week said every Negro who lived in it was gone. Not a single one is left to tell the tale. That's it, baby. That's it. We started chapter 10. So what y'all think about that, man? What y'all think about that? Let me know. Comment in the, get down in the comments. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all opinions. I got some opinions, but I don't want to bombard you with them because I take up a lot of y'all time anyways, dumping you with my thoughts. So I want to hear some of y'all stories, some of y'all experiences. Do y'all know of any, family members that have spread these stories around, whether you come from the descendants of those that were kicking black people out of Forsyth, or you were descendants of those who were a part of the group of people, the black people that were kicked out of Forsyth? What are some of the stories you were told? Comment below. I mean, I can work it out, get you on a Zoom interview, and I can interview you, or even your kinfolk, the ones that has more of the close attachment to those stories. But yeah, please believe, like I told y'all, I'm knowledgeable in this area to some degree. I speak to my older kinfolk, and my daddy, 62 years old, was a sharecropper. My dad he's one of those black people. He left the South because of, when he was younger, the South just had bad rep to it, right? It was like, I want to get away from it. He kind of, in a sense, he detested farming because of his experience as a sharecropper. He grew to hate it because of the treatment that he endured under the rule of white people. And my dad was upset, that his mother, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was one of those women who raised white people kids. She was their cook, they cleaner. My dad tells us so many stories about the times that he was upset because he felt like he didn't be around his mom much. He didn't really get to know her because she passed when he was 11. And he didn't get time to spend with his mom because his mom spent her time working on the lands of white people, taking care of their households and their families, right? And he felt that he was subjected and left with his dad, who abused him because it's this funky cycle, right? Where my granddad is a black man who dealt with all of the ills and the guiles, the terrible parts of the history as it pertains to black people, especially in the South. On top of the fact that my grandfather served in, I want to say it's either the Vietnam or the Korean War, one of the two, but he served in the war for about 3-4 years. And he was one of them that came back to poor treatment as a black person, right? You leave seeing your homeland one way, and you come back after fighting for them, seeing that they treat you exactly the same way, but you just got done putting your life on the line for them. You done sustained traumas and turmoil and harm, alterations to your mental. Like, my granddad turned into a psycho after that, abusing my grandmother and all of my, my daddy and his siblings. And every last one of them have some stories. I mean, some of them don't even like talking about their daddy because of the negative memories that comes from it. But then you got these weirdos out here who say things like, there's not a person alive who dealt with slavery. There's not a person alive who encountered, lynching and or deals with the effects of these things, or sharecroppers. And it's like, it's best if we speak on things that we know, and even then you got to be cautious, because a lot of times people be speaking on stuff that they think they know, but they don't know nothing about. So like I said, I would like to know, what is some of y'all's experiences? Comment below. Make sure you like, share this, and subscribe. I'm going to work on this and be a little bit better, and because my goal is to get out of this book. Okay, we're going to get up out of this book before, we about halfway through now. To God be the glory. So we about halfway through. So we making dues, but I need to go eat some breakfast, y'all. I love y'all. God bless. Peace. If you want people to think otherwise of you more positively, then give them more positive experiences.